I guess it came out like August time, didn't it, Friends? Like the end of the summer. It was good. I think the response to that album was good at the time. I remember thinking positively about it, and it was good. It was the first record that we'd made kind of made on our own and produced ourselves, I suppose. And so perhaps we were quite nervous about how it was going to be received. And I remember being pleasantly surprised that people didn't hate it, basically.
Yeah, it's great. Like that. We sort of didn't realise at the time, because like when you go on tour, you're just away, and you sort of lose perspective over what you're doing, really, because every day is just like, oh, where are we today, sort of thing, and you get on with the objective of that particular day. But then afterwards, looking back on it and hearing from other people, like from our label at the time, managers, they were like, I was by far the most successful tour we'd ever done. And so yeah, I think we were about 8 or 9 years into our career by then, so we were kind of it's a really good place to be. It's like, not bands usually go down, but we're sort of at very least just a slight increase. We try and keep.
Oh no, we'll just maintain.
Or just maintain, just treading water.
Yeah. We recorded it in June this year, start of June, and I think we started working on it probably
the summer before, in bits probably.
Was it the summer before?
I think we've been writing for like more or less a year, like on and off, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like writing was a bit more complicated this time. As I mentioned before, I was living in San Francisco, so had to spend a lot of time flying back and forth, basically. And we'd just do like a month or a few weeks here and there, and so I think the album probably took longer to write than the previous one, just because of the time constraints. But yeah, it was good fun working on this record, I think.
Yeah, and then so we finished it in. When did we finish it? In the summer. Finished it.
Well, we had it properly finished by the end of July, I guess.
We like it. We have our quite like set routines of how we write and record, and it works for us. And so yeah, I guess we're a bit nervous about trying to change that too much now.
I think it is tiring when we're busy. Even when we're doing stuff like this can be quite exhausting, traveling to cities in Europe and doing interviews, whatever. But I think that it's like a balance. Like, you have very intense moments. Like, also when you're working on the record, or when you're like planning a tour and going on tour and stuff like that. Like, it can be quite intense and exhausting. But then on the other side of that, we also get lots of time off. I guess it's like a bit like being in the army. Like,
it's exactly like being in the army. I've always said that.
No, maybe not. But you like we go away on tour for. I mean, next year we're probably touring for
a year.
Yeah. And then once that's all finished, though, like, you get like months off, and so it's like it all balances out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the end, and I quite like having that time off. I think it's important as a musician, but not necessarily being a musician, but doing anything creative, to have a lot of time where you get very bored and you don't really do very much. And it's nice then when you come back to working again that you feel like you really want to kind of grab the bull by the horns and really get into it, Yeah, it's good. I think the music that we made 10 years ago has, for the most part, disappeared from like the mainstream consciousness. It's not played on the radio, really. It's not, it's not really, I don't know, it's not really talked about as much, I guess. And when we were younger, it was like the biggest thing in the world, and we, that's where everything that we do came from, I suppose, like our teenage years and listening to that music. And yeah, so I think that's really changed. But I think despite that, we're still able to play shows and tour, and there's quite a few of those bands that are. And so I think people still like it. It's just not really cool anymore, I suppose.
I think it's quite different in parts of Europe than it is in the UK. I think the music scene, if there is even a scene now in the UK, is very different from how it was 10 years, and especially different from 15 years ago. Like, yeah, as Harry says, it was just, we spent our entire sort of teenage years effectively just entertaining ourselves within all that. So whether it was like going to indie nights at small venues where there were like loads of bands playing and then like a DJ or whatever, or playing shows ourselves as when we were in like, you know, bands with different names, whatever. That's what we all did like the whole time. And it wasn't just like we were going to the same place every Friday. Like there were loads of different places you could go all the time and during the week. But I think the live music venues in the UK are just in such a bad state compared to a lot of, even though the audiences are amazing in the UK and we have an amazing fan base, like, yeah, the venues themselves have just been they've just been let go a bit. And I think that must be a reflection of the music scene, because bands, as it were, you know, guitar bands are less of a kind of cool thing. I think people make music more than they ever did, but they just make it, you know, they do it in a different way.
Yeah, like it's much more like playing on a laptop.
Quite solitary.
Yeah, it's like people more of an individual thing.
Yeah, people make music on their own.
Yeah.
And I think there's also quite a lot, like there's quite a sort of paranoia these days around the idea of having ownership of your music and not wanting to share it and things like that, because of, I don't know, because you hear, you know, people are always getting sued and stuff like that for ripping each other off or whatever. I think people get themselves a laptop, sit in a room and think, right, I'm going to make this music, this is my music, it's on my own. And then when I need to perform it, I'll just have to get a band and then I'll find some random musicians they can play on stage with me. But it's my music, you know, whereas before, I know that all the bands we used to play with, all the bands we used to go and see, it was very much more
a collective process.
A collective thing, and almost a little bit more punk rock about the whole process. Just like, you know, yeah, we just jam we all rent a rehearsal room and we all play together until the song sounds good and it's our song. And yeah, I think that has gone a little bit.
Following on from the last record, I felt like there were a few flaws in Friends, like, and that was kind of teething problems for us learning the process of making a record ourselves. And it wasn't actually so much making the record, but it was about how we planned it, I think, and you know, the way we structured who we were working with and the studios we were working in. And you know, I think that we got a lot of it right, but not as much of it right as we did on this album. We
pretty much made this record like exactly how we wanted to do it. Like we sort of talked about it before and said this would be the ideal scenario, thinking about it in terms of getting the best results, but also in, you know, like being economical, not spending too much money,
who we wanted to work with,
where we wanted to be, how long it would take, things like that. And we just managed to do everything pretty much how we planned it, and that's good, I think. And that's one of the positives of working in the way that we do now, like what we were saying about, you know, working with laptops and things like that, is that you can do something and map it out and listen back to it and spend a few days considering it, and then you can edit it. Whereas in the past, when you would just write a song in a rehearsal room with instruments, it feels more fixed in a way. It's like, well, however it is when we leave this room, that's how it is. And yes, we go into a recording studio and we can slightly play with it, but really, it is how we play it. And like I said, there's pros and cons to both of those things, but I think for us at this point in our career and making the music, the kind of music that we want to make now, which is a little bit more considered and in some ways a little bit more complicated in the structure, it helps to have all this technology, you know, within a little tiny laptop. It's really useful. I think what we mean by that, or what's implied, is that, yeah, we kind of have this pretty good template for making a record now. We know that, you know, basically Harry and I have to go away and just write until we've got a bunch of songs that we like. But then if we want to keep making records like on our own and be producing stuff on our own, we have an amazing engineer called James Brown, who we've now worked with twice, although properly only really on this record because he had to leave a bit early on the last one. We found an amazing recording studio in London that's perfect for us, because it just has all of these instruments, just amazing instruments, all plugged in and ready to go at any time. We're confident with it, and it's firm. You feel much more able to do things like that, and I think that's a really exciting prospect for us. We're like, right, we've got this fundamental core like team around us to make records now, so we know it works. So now we can be a bit more experimental with, hey, why don't we get these people in and try doing something with them, and this person to come in, and we have these sort of people just like visit the studio for a day or 2 days, play some stuff, sing something, you know. It's exciting, I think, for the next few records, what we can do.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think it was important for us in a good moment that before we made the record, we didn't have a record deal, and it's nice now looking back on it that we were able to fund making that album and create the record that we wanted to create and work with the people that we wanted to work with without any help, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, it goes back to what I was saying before, like it's the first time perhaps that we felt like this is a viable career, like we don't really need any outside help now to do it.
Yeah, we can just do it.
Having said that, our label are great.
Yeah.
But, but it's a good moment now. It was important, I think.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.